Hi everybody, welcome back to a very interesting study. We're talking about Psalm 82 today. It's interesting because there's some debate. I'm not going to say it's widely debated, but in some circles there's some debate about the meaning of this psalm and the implications that it has. My brother is always harassing me because I won't accept his interpretation and view on Psalm 82. And so Stephen, if you're watching this video, I hope that it teaches you that I'm right and you're wrong. But no, we'll talk about the debate a little bit, and I certainly do not hold a hard and fast view, I wouldn't say, on this, but I'll do my best. More to come on that. If you want our PDF outline, you can download it on our website, as always, at tobelikechrist.com. Psalm 82 is written by Asaph, and we do have a New Testament reference today. Jesus quotes from Psalm 82 in John 10:34 through 36. Two themes today. God has delegated authority to rulers who are responsible for upholding his virtues. And then number two, God will judge those rulers who fail in their responsibilities. For definitions today, I have just one, and it's the divine counsel. Rather than define it here, we're going to go to the first section of our outline that's dedicated to talking about this divine counsel and trying to figure out what exactly is going on and what this term refers to. So you'll notice that our first section, just one verse, the divine counsel, is dedicated to discussing this idea and what's going on here. So Psalm 82 opens with God taking his seat in the, quote, divine counsel. It says that he sat in the midst of gods, lowercase g, you'll notice, I think all translations. He sits in the midst of the gods to hold judgment. Now, there's been a lot of debate. This is the debate about who these gods are, who this term refers to, because there's only one true God, right? So, what exactly is this lowercase gods thing? What's going on here? And there's two popular interpretations that exist. If you've heard any others, let me know down in the comments, especially if you find them to be compelling. But I think these are the most popular. The first one is this. These are earthly rulers that God has ordained to rule over the nations. So these are men on whom God has bestowed his authority, permitting them to rule and to judge over other men. They are gods, lowercase g, in the sense that the true God has delegated his authority to them to rule. So as God is the ultimate ruler, so these people have been given authority by God to rule in a smaller, you could say lowercase way amongst the children of men. So that's the first idea, is that this refers to men. Number two, this is my brother's view. These are spiritual beings who God has set over the nations. These beings are subordinate to God. They're not divine in the sense of that they share all the characteristics of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, but they are spiritual beings. They're set over the nations by God, but they are to act as God's representatives, having received authority from him. So the views aren't super different. In one case, we look at it as men who have received God's authority. In the second case, it's these spiritual beings who have received God's authority to rule, and they are responsible for upholding God's values and virtues and ruling justly, as we'll see in a little bit. At the moment, I kind of already gave this away, but at the moment I lean towards the first view, which is the one that I'll use to interpret the rest of the psalm, that these are men. Now, I do acknowledge, the sun is blinding me in my glasses. I do acknowledge that I think there are verses in the Old Testament especially that talk about spiritual beings who have been set over particular provinces of the earth. And that's a whole nother study that we can't do in 5 minutes. So I certainly don't deny that. But as far as Psalm 82, as of now, until I'm convinced otherwise, I think that this is referring to men. Okay, now, finally to section number 2. Every day I say to myself, I'm going to make this shorter. I'm going to make it under 5 minutes, and it never happens. So the last 7-8 verses here make up our second section, God's problem with these earthly rulers, right? These people who have been given his authority. God has a problem with them. He was not pleased with these men or the way that they were using their power. He accuses them of judging unjustly and showing partiality to the wicked. So they favored the wicked, and they didn't care at all about the weak and the fatherless and the afflicted or the destitute. They didn't understand the responsibility that God had placed on them. Neither were they interested in learning. They were just going to do their own thing, use their power in their own way. Asaph said that these men walked around in darkness, and because of their neglect of duty, the foundations of the earth were shaken. So in contrast to God, they ruled with a shaky and an unstable hand, failing to uphold the virtues of the Creator. These men had received a great privilege, but they were squandering it. They had been given authority by God to share in His rule, which is a tremendous privilege. God even refers to them as sons of the Most High, but they did not wear the name and the ordination of God as they should have. Because of their rebellion, God reminds them of their mortality. They were not eternal, and like all men, they were going to die. Just because they were rich and powerful and everybody bowed down to them, didn't mean that they were going to somehow escape death, and they were going to have to face God when they did that, having abused their position. So Asaph concluded Psalm 82 calling on the Lord to judge these evil rulers of the earth. He knew that God was the King of Kings. He was ultimately in charge, and that ultimately all nations and rulers were going to have to give an answer to him. So that is Psalm 82, and a little bit of an introduction as to some of the debates that go on about Psalm 82. Let's talk about our application now. While we may not all be kings and queens, I don't know about you, but I'm not a king of anything that I'm aware of, unless I have an uncle somewhere. We may not all be kings and queens governing large groups of people, but God has given all of us duties and roles that are important within His creation. We see from this chapter that God wants us to take the fulfillment of our roles very seriously, and He will call us into account for the way that we fulfill them. Therefore, it's important for you to understand what God expects from you in the roles that you've been given, or the roles that you take on, whether you're a mother or a father or a teacher or a boss or employee, an elder, a politician, a student, a child, a husband, a wife, a parent. Every one of those roles comes with God-given responsibilities, and we shouldn't take that lightly. In fact, we should be honored to take our place in the creation and to contribute to the beautiful world that God has set up and doing things God's way. To do that, we need to learn what God has to say about each of those roles, and we learn that from His Word, from the Scriptures. And after we learn, we need to make application. One thing to keep in mind, and that is that the way that God defines roles and duties may not always match up with the way that the godless world wants to define those same roles. And so that's super important to keep in mind, especially as our world is bent on redefining all of the roles around gender and masculinity and femininity and all of it. So keep in mind God's roles and the requirements for those roles and how He envisions those people to be and to interact in His creation. That is most certainly going to be different from what the world is promoting. But it's not really any question who we should be listening to. God is our creator, and every time human beings touch something, they mess it up, including the creation. We learn that in like the first 3 chapters of the Bible. So in this case, and in all cases, let's listen to God and what He has to say on this issue.